All right, this video is less of a tutorial, more of just a walkthrough of something I've been working on. It is an open source project, calling it Flutter Skeleton. It's not unique in the sense that there aren't other boilerplates out there, but over the last year of using Flutter, um, I've come up with certain practices I like, and this kind of puts those things together. One of the things I wanted to do with this is really make a Flutter application that obviously works on all devices that Flutter supports, but specifically making sure that web is a first party citizen. I find a lot of the times, you spend your work doing an iOS app and then maybe you'll wrap it into the web one. But then there's all these issues with like permalinks, SEO, all these kinds of things. So this, I just kind of want to walk through this. This will be an ongoing project that I'm doing, um, and the source code is in GitHub. So I just want to talk about a couple of the challenges that I'm trying to solve here. Again, nothing, not inventing anything super new. It's kind of just tying a lot of good things together. One of the things is like pathing for the web. So we kind of have like a dashboard here with this URL, and if we were to change to, for instance, this, we got this lovely, different URL here. And if I refresh on this, like if someone sent me that direct link, I could be brought right there. So that's handy. Obviously, a website you kind of expect that the links, the URL will change, and not only that will allow you to come back to that particular place. Um, so that's one of the things. Another thing is just like responsiveness in general, which I'll show you some examples in a bit. A couple things that we're doing here is obviously, it's scales kind of nicely, but this would just happen by default on, even if it was a Mac app. But one thing I am doing is this is a really large screen that, the YouTube video is just going to be 1080p, but it's actually a 4K screen. And rather than just kind of positioning stuff, when you get to a certain screen height, you'll actually see that the uh, the actual content scales itself too, so that you don't just have like this really tiny tiny fonts when you have this huge screen. So it's kind of like a nice thing. Another thing I'm doing is, and this will make more sense with code, but let me just demonstrate it by kind of adding some guys here. So essentially, I have like a workflow for, okay, I want to actually have a totally different layout for mobile or a totally different layout for desktop. It is all mobile first, so you build mobile first, then you can kind of override how the layout behaves. And all I've done for this example is when it's a certain width and more, basically like a desktop size, it will render this in a row. But if I actually make it smaller, you'll see it renders in a column. Obviously, there's some stuff going on here, but this is just really for an example purpose. So we'll see that in the code, and it'll be all nice. What else? SEO. I have a good solution in there for basically like things like Open Graph and bots and stuff like that, so that when you do share a link within your Flutter application, web crawlers can access the dynamic content. This is an interesting thing that actually I kind of put a solution together in a separate video called Flutter SEO. And I have a much better solution now that is really just configuring something, and we'll see that in a bit too. I'm just gonna log in real quick and just make sure my stuff's all working. Let me just refresh. There we go. Okay, what else are we trying to solve here? Oh, another thing is persistent tab bar. So the default tab bar, if you're just kind of building a native Flutter app, you can have a tab bar. And so we have a tab bar here, very cool. The problem with it is the default one, at least, when you go deeper into this tab, a normal Flutter app without doing a bunch of work will you'll lose the tab bar. It won't be persistent, and you have to kind of go back, and then you get the tab bar. This I found a good way to make it so that your tab bar is actually persistent. No matter what screen you're on within this sort of like dashboard, you always see the tab bar, and it will remember where you are in the stack. So if I'm, for instance, looking at users and go back to home, which I was one spot deep already, it remembers where I am. So these are kind of all being treated as their own stack, as an app should be. So I played around a lot of different ways to do that, and I'm really happy with the way it works. So there we go. And you'll notice, you probably noticed that another challenge is, okay, on a desktop app or on a mobile app, having a tab bar is pretty common. 3 tabs, 5 tabs, whatever you want. But it looks funny if, this was a desktop app and you had a tab bar. That's not really what you want. So I have a good way to kind of change how it renders and put the navigation up here to, to be really pretty. And there's nothing stopping us from even having more items in the top nav than in the tab bar, but currently they're just equals. Okay, and yeah, those are kind of at least say an overview of sort of some of the challenges I was trying to solve. So this application is also uh, because pretty much anything I do requires an API with it. Generally, we build our APIs in Django and Python using Django REST framework, but ultimately it's just a RESTful API, so this will work without very much change for a basic system. And the core things I've kind of included in here is authentication, really just logging in and creating an account and logging out, as well as a couple of very basic endpoints that you can expect from any app, like getting a bunch of categories or getting users back, that kind of stuff. So we'll be walking through stuff like that. Also, what else do we have in here? We have this menu that has things like settings. So something that's really cool is, and you've seen this a million times, but you can actually change themes and everything's really nice. Something that's actually really cool that I learned by accident was if you use system theme and you actually change your Mac or your phone's theme, the Flutter app will actually just update on the fly, which I thought was really cool. It's I didn't think that would actually happen. We also have localization stuff, so just being able to change from English to Spanish. Now I haven't tied everything in to use the localization, so if I do change to Spanish and go back, you will see different things. But some things are translated, some aren't. But the workflow's there for it. Okay, cool. For some reason, that's fine. Still a work in progress. Okay, so let's look at some of the things that we're doing here. So we'll just look at the pub spec first, just to kind of see what we're doing, and I'll zoom this when appropriate. It's already now it's 2 sizes bigger than I would normally use, but I know this will be streamed. So I'm going to clean up the order of these because it's kind of random, but using equatable, that's just for for state changes and stuff, to know if something changed between a model, to know if you have to repaint. Obviously, we're using Flutter. I am using Gedit for certain things, basically just our singletons. So we have I have a file called singletons.dart, and all it really is right now for the app router, so you can access it at any point, as well as for the storage service that we've built, and that's for saving things to your local storage, such as remembering what your auth token is, for example. We're using RiverPod, loving it. I've used a lot of different things, everything from provider to block to just, I don't know, set state and stuff, but I do really like RiverPod, and I'm happy with the implementation of it so far. Retrofit is, I actually forget what retrofit is at this exact moment. Let me just see. Oh, I don't get my dark theme because I'm using the Chrome, the Flutter Chrome. Oh, there it's dark. Let's know what this is doing. Retrofit, type conversion, DO client. So okay, yeah, it's being used somewhere in our API to generate models and stuff, because there's a lot of generation happening here. Shared preferences, that's just for local storage. .env I really like. I've used it in most projects, just a way to have environment files so that that you can kind of have different flavors and change your configuration. And the way this is set up, you can close this. We essentially have different env files. You have an example that is version controlled, whereas your dev, your prod, whatever else you need would not be. And that's just for if you have multiple devs working on something, they can create their own. But basically, you put different settings in here, and then your application can access them. We have DO. So instead of just using HTTP, which mostly is what I've used, DO is just kind of like one step on top of that. And the one thing I like about it is, one thing that's annoying with HTTP is when you want to kind of have get parameters, you have to still pass a string for your URL with like question mark, key equals value, ampersand key equals value. And it's a little bit tedious. And in other projects, I've kind of just written a helper that, changes a map to that. But deal, you just pass params as a map. So that's one thing I like about it. There's other good things about it too. Authentication is using JWT, so we have JWT decoder. Infinite scroll pagination is really nice. I've used that on pretty much every project. And now I have my favorite implementation of it, because a lot of the times I was seeing it's, when I've used it in the past, not very dry when I have a lot of list views, but I found a really happy way that allows you to have less code, and just make a list really fast. And that's all tied in with, with RiverPod and everything for the state management and events. Okay, auto route. I'd say out of everything, I refactored and rebuilt my routing strategy the most in coming up with this. The auto route is used obviously for routing. So being able to have, this sort of slash dashboard slash that. And what I really love about it is it's a generation sort of pattern. So, and we'll look at that in a bit, but you can write very little code and it generates very complex code. That's really fun. URL strategy, all this is actually used for is just to get rid of, at least right now, just to get rid of the hash bang, the exclamation mark, pound exclamation mark slash, which makes this, have proper URLs and not sort of that like fake URL pattern, which is really important, especially when we look at the kind of like the permalinking and SEO side of things. JSON annotations, this allows us to make models and work with our models and build essentially like the sort of like, convert this JSON to my model with very, very little code. Responsive framework, this is being used to kind of mostly to do that scaling thing. It allows you to have breakpoints as well, but it's pretty sweet. And then logger, just for some logging. Here's some dev dependencies for some of this stuff. Freezed, for instance, and that's for like these sort of model generators. Obviously, we talked about auto route and using auto route generator, JSON serializer, the test framework, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of like an overview of the sort of things that we have here. One I didn't do is Flutter. I think it's Flutter Gen Runner. Something that's really cool is in my Gen folder, and I have to remember where that is. I think it's in lib generated. What this does is it actually kind of watches what is in your assets folder. So for instance, I have, a few images here. I have those env files, and it creates this file every time if you're watching and you make a change there or you recompile. And it actually essentially, instead of having to remember what this, work with strings in your app when you're dealing with references, it becomes this basically constant or this getter that you can access through code. And it's always nice to reference things through code, because then, if you change something, it it will you'll start getting compiling errors. Whereas if you change a file name and you're just referencing as a file name, it can be something you don't notice. So a lot of like generation stuff just to make things really dry and really tight and typed. Okay, so we'll just kind of walk through what's going on here. So main.dart, just the very basic stuff. We init our environment. So this is kind of like a file you can basically set right here. Okay, I want to use my develop or production or stage or testing or whatever ones you have, and it finds that file. And there's basically some expected things that are supposed to be in that file. Otherwise, it will kind of default to things like unset or just like domain.com. Obviously, if you don't override this one, you're going to have a problem, but you'll find out pretty quick. So and now what we can do is anywhere in our app, we can just kind of go like env dot storage prefix to access that. So we're never outside of this file, we're never actually talking to .env with these these strings that you could easily mistype. As long as you type it correctly here, you're good. So we initialize that because our whole app needs that. We run that set path URL strategy, which is just a function inside URL strategy, and all it really does is get rid of that hash bang. I don't even know how it works. I don't care. It works. And then we do something called a init app module, and the app module is basically all the singletons. So we have a singleton for shared preferences in general, although I don't even think this gets accessed throughout the app. I could probably actually, I'm sure I could safely actually change this to this or something, and it would be fine. We will see. because yeah, really what we I'm just gonna keep it. It's fine. But this is where, and we might have more singletons in the future in a bigger project, but we have one for our shared preferences, one for storage, and one for app router. But really, I'm just using in the app router and the storage one. So those get like initialized first. So we await that. And then we run app. Yay. There's a root restoration scope thing in it, which I forget exactly what it does, but it's there. I think it's something to do with so that your state will restore when you do hot reloads and stuff. But again, I don't quite remember. Then we have our app. So a few things right off the top is these are just some global things like the bottom navigation bar, the root navigator key, and the root scaffold or messenger key. This allows us to do, access everything with our bottom navigation bar, a global key for that. This is really important because a lot of the times we will be, routing when we don't have access to context. So rather than typing this out every time, it's just nice to have this like root navigator key, which goes in here. And root scaffold messenger key. This is so that we can send toasts or like bottom scaffold messages, from anywhere, even when we don't have context to state. And in this setup here, we are, although I'm not using Flutter block, it's very business logic separated. So there is a lot of the time. In fact, it's very rare that I'm doing any kind of like messaging my sending a little toast to the bottom from my UI where we have access to context in the widget tree, because I'm trying to keep all that stuff separated, as you'll see. So we have our app. It extends. So it actually extends instead of the normal stateless widget, we're using something called consumer widget. A consumer widget is built into Riverpod. And what it gives you is it gives you your build context as normal, but it also gives you this ref. And this is essentially how we access anything and listen or read our state. I have this little debugger thing that I made that really is just a wrapper for that logger plugin. And it's pretty basic right now, but you could easily, add more stuff. So it allows us just to log or do an error or do a warning. And so I don't have to remember, all these different settings. It's pretty basic. So I just have kind of like, app bootstrap so that I can watch when that's happening. And kind of not really necessary, but it's there. And then we have a material app, but it's a material app.router because we are passing in the router delegate, which is that auto route delegate. This was something I still kept this here because I was kind of still playing around with something, but it's probably safe to remove now. Again, this is still a work in progress. And then we have to wrap our actual, so you can put a builder within your material route that kind of like gets called before and you pass in your widget and everything's cool. This allows us to wrap everything within our material app within this responsive wrapper to have that in the context so that you can have breakpoints and stuff. And you'll see my breakpoints. This is actually my own file breakpoints, and we just kind of set some different breakpoints like mobile, tablet, desktop, and 4K for that auto scale sort of thing. Oh, right. So sorry if I'm skipping through things a lot. There's a lot to go over here, and the source code is available, so you can definitely look in more depth.